We'll be back with more news. China to U.S. Stop plundering Syrian resources. Pull troops out. This is from Press TV. China's called on the U.S. to stop plundering the natural resources in Syria and withdraw its military forces from the country. We call on the U.S. to sincerely respect the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of other countries and to immediately stop its illegal military presence and marauding in Syria. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning told a news briefing on Friday. China also urged the U.S. to lift the illegal sanctions slapped on Syria and to stop all the actions that exacerbate the humanitarian crisis in the country. The U.S. has illegally intervened in military activities related to the Syrian crisis, which has led to the death of a large number of innocent civilians and a serious humanitarian disaster, Mao said, adding that his government calls on the U.S. authorities to lift illegal unilateral sanctions against Syria and to stop actions that aggravate the humanitarian situation in the country. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, since 2014, the Syrian crisis in the country has resulted in at least 350,000 people losing their lives in the violence and 14 million being in dire need of humanitarian aid. In the meantime, the U.S. Congress on Thursday rejected a bill calling for the exit of U.S. occupation troops from Syria. The majority of the U.S. House lawmakers, 321 to 103, voted against the Syria War Powers Resolution, which required U.S. President Joe Biden to bring American troops home within 180 days. The rejected bill was introduced by a Florida Republican lawmaker, Matt Gaetz, followed a recent incident in which 4 American soldiers were wounded while conducting a raid in the Arab country. Gaetz slammed U.S. lawmakers for voting against the bill, insisting that the U.S. Congress had never authorized military action in Syria in the first place. There's no role for the United States of America in Syria. We are not a Middle Eastern power. We've tried to build a democracy out of the sand, blood, and Arab militias, Gaetz said. Time and again, the work we do does not reduce chaos. Oftentimes it causes chaos, the very chaos that then subsequently leads to terrorism. While today's vote may have failed, my fight to end forever wars and bring our troops home has only just begun, he added. Gaetz further noted that several prior Inspector General reports have concluded that a resurgence of Daesh in Syria is unlikely, instead claiming that the American presence had served as a recruiting tool for the terrorist group. U.S.-led occupation forces invaded Syria in 2014 under the pretext of the emergency of the Daesh Takfiri terrorist group, which had seized huge swaths of land in both Syria and neighboring Iraq and aimed to overrun Iran as well. U.S. created terrorist groups in the Middle East to further its imperial agenda. It took over 3 years for the National Iraqi and Syrian armies to liberate the areas from the grip of the world's most notorious terrorist group. Damascus and Baghdad declared the extermination of the terrorist outfit in late 2017 and have since been involved in clear-up operations against the extremist group's remnants. Despite the announced demise of Daesh, Iraq's border regions, shared with Syria, are still suffering from sporadic attacks by underground cells. And from the cradle, China urges Washington to end occupation and marauding of Syria. Beijing's reportedly called on the White House to end its illegal practices inside Syria. The nation was also among the first to send aid to Syria following last month's earthquake. China's repeated calls for the U.S. to end its illegal military occupation of Syria and stop looting the country's resources, stressing that its continued presence has worsened Syria's humanitarian crisis. We call on the U.S. to sincerely respect the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the other countries and to immediately stop its illegal military presence and marauding in Syria, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said during a news conference on 11 March. The U.S. has illegally intervened in military activities related to the Syrian crisis, which has led to the death of a large number of innocent civilians and a serious humanitarian disaster, Mao added before calling on U.S. officials to lift crushing economic sanctions on Syria. Beijing's call came just 2 days after U.S. lawmakers voted against a war powers resolution that called for withdrawing troops from Syria. Around 900 U.S. troops are currently deployed in the Levantine nation, controlling nearly a third of the country and a large portion of its oil fields. Their deployment is illegal under international law and was not approved by the government in Damascus. This is not the first time Beijing has bashed Washington's illegal presence in Syria. Back in January, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said Syria's energy crisis and humanitarian disaster are a result of the U.S. and its proxy militias plundering its resources. U.S. stationing troops in Syria is illegal. U.S. smuggling oil and grain from Syria is illegal. U.S. missile attacks against Syria are also illegal, he said. A year ago, Chinese and Syrian officials signed a memorandum of understanding welcoming Damascus into the Belt and Road Initiative. Launched 9 years ago, the BRI is a mega infrastructure project that seeks to bring capital and infrastructure to global South countries while dramatically strengthening connectivity for commerce, finance, and culture. China was among the first nations to send aid to Syria following last month's devastating earthquake, when aid deliveries from the West were being held up due to U.S. sanctions. And from Mayor News, China calls on U.S. to pull troops from Syria. We call on the U.S. to sincerely respect the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of other countries, and to immediately stop its illegal military presence and marauding in Syria, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning told the news briefing on Friday, according to Press TV. China also urged the U.S. to lift the illegal sanctions slapped on Syria and to stop all actions that exacerbate the humanitarian crisis in the country. The U.S. has illegally intervened in military activities related to the Syrian crisis, which has led to the death of a large number of innocent civilians and a serious humanitarian disaster. Mao said, adding that his government calls on the U.S. authorities to lift illegal unilateral sanctions against Syria and to stop actions that aggravate the humanitarian situation in the country. According to the Chinese foreign minister spokesperson, since 2014, the Syrian crisis in the country has resulted in at least 350,000 people losing their lives in the violence and 14 million people being in dire need of humanitarian aid. U.S.-led occupation forces invaded Syria in 2014 under the pretext of the emergence of the Daesh Takfiri terrorist group, which had seized huge swaths of land in both Syria and neighboring Iraq and aimed to overrun Iran as well. And from ChinaMill.com.cn, China urges U.S. to end illegal occupation plundering in Syria, Foreign Minister spokesperson. Beijing, March 10th, Xinhua. China calls on the U.S. to immediately end the troops' illegal occupation and plundering in Syria, removing illegal unilateral sanctions, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said on Friday. Mao made the remarks at a regular press briefing when answering a query concerning the U.S. House voting down a bill directing removal of troops from Syria this week. Mao said since the U.S. began its illegal interference in the Syrian crisis, its military operations in Syria have taken away a large number of innocent civilian lives and caused grave humanitarian disasters. The U.S. has been criticized multiple times by the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Syrian Arab Republic of the UN for indiscriminate attacks that may amount to a war crime, said the spokesperson. Noting that the Syrian crisis will soon enter its 13th year, Mao said at least 350,000 people have lost their lives and 14 million people are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. We call on the U.S. to respect other countries' sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, immediately end the troops' illegal occupation and plundering in Syria, remove illegal unilateral sanctions, and stop creating and aggravating humanitarian disasters, Mao said. And I'm going to open the channel here.